He doesn't suspect a thing. I mean, look at the kids. He genuinely thinks they're his. God, Mom, it's pathetic. She didn't know I was behind the door. She didn't know I'd come home early. She didn't know I could hear everything. And just like that, the last 14 years of my life collapsed in under 7 seconds. I stood in the hallway, hand frozen on the doorknob to our laundry room, listening to my wife slice my soul apart one smug word at a time. Her voice had that cruel, casual tone, like she was talking about a dumb coworker who brings a sad sandwich to lunch every day. Eli's eyes. Rob's. Marin's curls. Totally his sister's. Joel just doesn't see it. He thinks love makes them look like him, or some crap. The blender roared for a moment. Then more laughter. No, I'm serious. He even built bunk beds for them last summer. Like some sitcom dad. He's just there. That's all he is. There. Paying bills. Fixing crap. Being useful. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I didn't move until I heard the call end and the little ding of her phone being set on the kitchen counter. I pushed the door open and stepped out. She jumped. Jesus, Joel. You scared me. What? Put the phone down, Julia. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. She froze, phone still in her hand, mouth half open. What are you talking about? Put it down. She placed it on the counter slowly, like I was pointing a weapon at her. She knew that I knew, and I knew that she knew I knew. And just like that, the game began. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask questions. I walked out the front door and drove around the neighborhood for 3 hours with shaking hands and a head full of static. By the time I returned, she was pretending to sleep. I didn't wake her. I sat in the garage in the dark until sunrise, staring at the birthday decorations I had stashed away for her upcoming party. I wasn't going to throw them away. No, I was going to use every single one of them. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a second. While she laid upstairs in our bed pretending everything was fine and pretending not to know that I knew, I sat in the garage surrounded by old toys, power tools, and half-finished memories. I stared at the shelves filled with her old gardening supplies and our kids' forgotten art projects. I could still hear her voice in my head, looped like a sadistic lullaby. He's just there. The words had this echo. They weren't angry. They weren't bitter. They were worse. They were indifferent. Like I was some furniture she tolerated because it matched the room. My hands were clenched the entire time. I think I cracked the plastic on the armrest of the lawn chair I was sitting in. Around 4:30 a.m. I stood up and opened the drawer of my old workbench. I pulled out the black notebook I used when I used to sketch DIY ideas for the house. Floor plan mods, deck extensions, even a tree house I never finished. I flipped to a clean page and, instead of blueprints, I started writing a plan. Not a revenge fantasy. Not something out of a TV show. Something real. Tactical. Measured. A checkmate, not a tantrum. Her 40th birthday was 5 days away. She thought I was still planning her big garden party. And I was. Oh, I was planning it so thoroughly, she'd never see what was coming. Day 1. I printed the receipt I found in the trash. The one from Elliot's Bistro, a place she once said made her nauseous because of their butter. Apparently, Rob made it easier to digest. Day 2. I opened a secret storage folder on the family computer and moved over years of bank statements, travel records, school forms, anything that had dates and signatures and handwriting. I cross-referenced it all. Birthdays, conception dates. I was mapping the timeline like I was solving a murder, because in some ways, that's exactly what it felt like. The murder of my reality. The most brutal moment came on day 3. I had convinced myself, naively, that maybe just one child wasn't mine. That maybe Marin, with her chestnut hair and hazel eyes, was the anomaly. But Eli? He had my smile, my sense of humor, my temper tantrums. There was no way. Except, there was. I found an old baby photo of Rob online. A deep Google dive through an alumni page she didn't know I knew about. And just like that, the illusion cracked in two. Eli wasn't mine either. Not by blood. Just by bedtime stories. By peanut butter sandwiches. By 1,000 little moments that I gave freely while another man gave nothing but DNA. That night, Julia asked if I wanted to go to dinner. Just us, she said, to unwind before the big week. She kissed me on the cheek, and I swear, I felt numb. Like my skin had been replaced with rubber. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Sure, let's celebrate." She smiled like she'd won. And that's when I knew I wasn't going to expose her. Not at dinner. not in some messy confrontation. I was going to celebrate her birthday exactly how she wanted it, with friends, wine, lights, music, and guests she didn't invite. The chessboard was set, and it was finally my turn to move. By Thursday, I had rehearsed the entire night in my head at least a dozen times. Every glass poured, every song cued, every stupid twinkle light wrapped around our back porch. Julia was buzzing with excitement, fluttering around the house like a high school girl before prom. She had no idea that I had already contacted Rob. Yes, him. I found his profile through the bistro's tagged Instagram photos, where someone had posted a shot of him clinking wine glasses with a familiar gold bracelet I'd seen Julia wear around the house. His name was Robert Delling. He worked in insurance, divorced, 2 towns over, and apparently, he wasn't aware of just how much of a father he actually was. I debated whether or not to tell him, whether I should give him the same reality-crushing gift I'd just received. But I decided against it, not yet. Because this wasn't about him. It was about her. That morning, while Julia was at her nail appointment, I called the catering company and asked them to add 2 extra tables to the guest list. I also updated the names on the seating chart. Subtle changes. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make her feel a little off balance when she looked around the backyard and saw faces she hadn't approved. Her mom was still coming, of course. The same woman who snickered on the other end of the phone while my soul was being gutted. I placed her right next to me at dinner. Julia's friends? They'd be at the other end of the long outdoor table, laughing about God knows what while I raised a toast. Speaking of the toast, that was my masterpiece. I wrote it in the same garage notebook, and I practiced it 3 times in front of the mirror. It was heartfelt, vulnerable, gracious, nothing suspicious. But layered inside were little nods, little verbal landmines that only she would recognize. I would thank her for teaching me how to see beyond the surface. I'd mentioned the beautiful illusions we build together. I even wrote a line about how blood isn't everything. Sometimes it's the effort, not the DNA, that makes you a father. That one would slice straight through her without anyone else noticing. Later that night, as she tried on dresses in the bedroom, she called out, "Red or navy? Which looks more like a birthday queen?" I stared at her through the mirror and said, "Whichever one you want to be remembered in." She laughed, thought I was being sweet, said, "God, you're so poetic when you want to be." And I smiled, because she had no idea that every word coming out of my mouth was laced with goodbyes. The truth was, I wasn't just planning a party. I was staging a controlled demolition. The kind of fall that looked like an accident from the outside, but inside, everything collapses perfectly. I wasn't going to scream at her in front of the guests. I wasn't going to shame her publicly. No, I was going to let her unravel on her own, piece by piece, until the lies she built her little kingdom on began to buckle beneath her heels. That night, as I stood outside stringing up fairy lights, I heard her hum a song from our wedding. And for a split second, one brief, flickering moment, I almost forgave her. Almost. Until I remembered that somewhere in that house were 2 children who had no idea that they were chapters in someone else's love story. And I was just the editor, the footnote, the idiot who believed in happy endings. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not after tomorrow. The morning of the party was unnervingly calm. Birds chirped. The sky held that perfect, empty blue. Julia was glowing in that effortless, curated way women do when they think they're about to be adored. She moved through the house like a bride before the ceremony, brushing her hair in slow motions, picking out earrings like the night might be photographed by Vogue. She kissed the kids on the head, texted someone, probably that snake in khakis, Rob, and reminded me to make sure the champagne gets chilled on time. I told her not to worry. Everything was handled, and it was. Every wine bottle, every fork, every subtle rearrangement of the guest list. I'd even replaced the slideshow on her laptop with a new version. Same music, same photo order, but a final image swap she wouldn't notice until it was far too late. Something small, but sharp enough to puncture the balloon of her fantasy. Just a little pinprick at the end. A signature. By 6 p.m., the backyard was dressed like a wedding. White linen tables, hanging lights, a small acoustic band she'd hired for ambience. People arrived in waves. Julia's co-workers, her yoga friends, the neighborhood couple who always flirted too openly in public. I greeted everyone like the faithful husband I'd always been. My smile was just polished enough to hide the crack underneath. No one suspected a thing. Except maybe Julia's mother. She gave me this look when I handed her a glass of Pinot. Not exactly guilt. Not even suspicion. It was more like wariness. As if some part of her knew I had seen the curtain drop and was now just waiting for the final bow. She said something casual like, "Lovely setup, Joel. You always take such good care of her." And I just nodded, letting the silence do the rest of the talking. Julia made her entrance just after the sun dipped low enough to make the fairy light sparkle. She wore the navy dress. I had secretly hoped for red. Red would have fit the stage better, but navy worked. It made her look regal, untouchable, like the queen she thought she was. People clapped. Some cheered, and she played it up, spinning slowly, laughing like a woman who had fooled the world and knew it. And maybe she had, but not anymore. After the cake was cut, and after the second bottle of champagne had loosened the crowd, Julia stood next to me in front of the garden trellis and asked if I wanted to say a few words. I took the mic, thanked the crowd, praised the weather, threw in a few jokes. Everyone smiled. Julia squeezed my hand, and then I began the real speech. I talked about the strength of building a home, of being a team, of the invisible things people do for love that no one ever sees. The midnight trips to the pharmacy, the sacrifices made silently, the days you show up even when you don't want to. Her friends cooed, and Julia gave me this watery smile like she couldn't believe how lucky she was. And then I said it. But the most important thing, I told the crowd, the thing that keeps love real, is honesty. Even when it's ugly. Even when it's hard to look at. Honesty is what makes a family. Not just DNA. Not just appearances. But truth. There was a flicker in Julia's eyes. A flicker she couldn't mask fast enough. She turned toward me slightly, lips parting. I could feel her pulse shift, even from 6 inches away. I closed the speech with a toast. To the people we love, and the secrets they think we'll never find. Half the crowd laughed. The other half clapped politely. Julia's hand dropped from mine. The band kicked in again. Conversations resumed. But Julia just stood there, smiling too wide, like someone bracing for a gunshot that hadn't fired yet. Because she knew. She knew I knew. And the night was far from over. She tried to pretend everything was fine. That was her first mistake. The second was underestimating just how carefully I'd been pulling the strings beneath her perfect little world. After the toast, I watched her walk through the crowd with that brittle smile stretching tighter every time someone raised a glass to her. She laughed a little too loud, complimented someone's shoes, kissed a baby on the cheek like she was running for local office, all while occasionally glancing toward me, calculating, measuring, wondering if the dagger had already been driven in or if I was still sharpening it. I didn't approach her. Not right away. I wanted to see what she would do when the cracks began to show on their own. The first one came when she noticed her old friend Shayla at the bar, someone who wasn't on the final guest list she'd sent me. Julia blinked twice, smiled, and walked over with forced excitement. I watched them hug, watched Julia lean in and whisper something while her friend tilted her head slightly in confusion, then shrugged it off. That's when Julia's eyes found her mother, seated 2 tables away, and next to her, another uninvited face. A former coworker she once called the worst gossip in the tri-state area. That's when her smile dropped. Only for a second, but I caught it. The corner of her mouth tightened like someone had yanked a fishing line. She started scanning the backyard more actively now, not like a hostess, but like a woman trying to figure out how many strangers had walked into her locked house. She excused herself and walked into the kitchen. I followed, but not too close. I stood just near enough to hear the familiar tone shift in her voice as she called someone, probably trying to figure out how all these people got invited. But I'd covered my tracks well. The catering company thought she'd updated the list. The event staff thought she had arranged the changes. I left no fingerprints, just enough silence to let her imagine every possibility. When she turned and saw me in the doorway, her expression flickered. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just said, "Joel, can we talk?" I shrugged. Sure. After the slideshow. Her face went pale. What slideshow? The one we worked on. The family one. You know, the one you wanted to end with the baby photo of Marin in the sunflower dress? I smiled gently. I made a few last-minute edits. Hope you don't mind. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, applause rose from the backyard. They were calling for her. The birthday queen. I watched her walk out with a spine made of glass. every step slower than the one before it. She smiled and waved and sat back in her chair while the projector screen flickered on behind her. The music started, that sappy acoustic version of Sweet Child O' Mine she insisted on using. People awed at the baby pictures. The crowd was eating it up. Then came the final image. A family photo. One of the oldest. Me, Julia, the kids, taken on our second Christmas as a family. Only now, there was a caption at the bottom in subtle, elegant white lettering. Most people didn't even notice it. They just kept clapping. But Julia saw it. Every story has a truth. Some just take longer to tell. I looked at her across the table. She looked back at me with wide eyes. For the first time in years, she was speechless. And she knew this wasn't over. This was just the warning shot. The applause eventually died down. A few guests wiped their eyes. Some chuckled about how cute the kids were. But Julia, she just sat there, completely still, like someone who had just been told that the plane they were on had lost an engine, but no one else had noticed yet. She clapped too, mechanically, two soft slaps that didn't even touch each other. Then her hand fell to her lap, and her eyes stayed fixed on the screen long after it went black. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was cycling through every possibility. Did I know everything? Was it just suspicion? Was that caption a metaphor or a threat? Was this a trap or a confession? She stood up slowly and walked toward the house, not saying a word. And this time, I followed her. She was already in the kitchen when I came through the back door. The faucet was running, just running, and she was gripping the counter so tightly that her knuckles were white. When she finally turned around, her eyes were dry but sharp. "What are you doing, Joel?" she asked. I tilted my head. "Cleaning up. Isn't that what I'm good for?" Her jaw tightened. "This isn't funny." I stepped closer, my voice low. "Neither is raising another man's children for 14 years. Her breath caught, but she recovered fast. She shook her head, still trying to hold the upper hand. "You don't have proof. You're just guessing. You're emotional." "I'm clinical," I interrupted. "I'm precise. I've had time. You handed me silence, and I used it well." There was a flicker in her face, that moment of realization that no denial could hold the weight of what she'd built. She was standing on a bridge made of matchsticks, and I hadn't even struck the flame. "Not yet." She tried to deflect. "We have guests. You're going to ruin everything if you—" I laughed. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet, tired laugh that carried more contempt than shouting ever could. "Julia," I said, "you already ruined everything. I'm just rearranging the furniture before the house collapses." She didn't respond. Her mouth opened, then closed. And then she walked past me, back into the yard like nothing had happened. I watched her mingle, pose for selfies, laugh a little too hard again. She was desperate to reset the mood, to push everything back into place before it slipped. But I knew something she didn't. Once you hear the truth, no amount of pretending makes the music sound the same. And then came the final guest. Right on time. Rob. He arrived late. Casual. Button-down shirt, nice shoes. He thought this was just a drop-in. Probably thought he was being clever, sneaky. But I had invited him personally, through a burner email Julia didn't know I had. He didn't recognize me, of course. He only knew my wife's husband as a faceless idiot in a photo frame. But when I walked over and offered him a drink, his smile froze about halfway through forming. "Joel," I said, extending my hand. "Father of the Year." His face drained of color. He didn't take my hand. That's when Julia looked over and saw us standing together. She stopped laughing. Her wine glass dipped. And for a full 5 seconds, the entire party moved in slow motion. Conversations blurred, the music softened, but all I could see was the expression on her face. It wasn't shock. It was fear. She wasn't ready for this part of the show. But I was. And I had 3 more moves left to make. Everything slowed down the moment Rob and I locked eyes. He was already sweating. Not visibly, not yet. But I could see the twitch at the edge of his mouth, the subtle shift in posture, the way he held his drink like it might become a shield. He hadn't come here to confront. He thought he was crashing a party, maybe catching a glimpse of Julia from a distance, maybe exchanging a smirk across the lawn and slipping away before anyone noticed. He didn't know that the moment he stepped through that gate, he was walking into a room with no exits. I leaned in just a little and said, "She's right over there. You might as well say hi. It's a celebration, after all." His lips parted, but nothing came out. Julia, standing under the patio lights with her friends, Looked like she had seen a ghost rise from the soil. Her fingers clenched the stem of her wine glass so tightly I thought it might snap. For a second, she didn't move. Then, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, she walked. No, stumbled. Toward us. Her face pale, her smile already gone. "Rob," she said, breathless. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me, then at her, then at the guests, some of whom were starting to sense that something was very, very wrong. I answered for him. "He's here for the kids." I figured he should finally attend a family event. The way her face collapsed in real time. It was like watching a dam split straight down the middle. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't faint or run. She just stood there, staring at both of us, unable to breathe. Rob looked like he wanted to evaporate. "You told me he didn't know," he muttered. "She told you a lot of things," I said. "She told me plenty, too. Most of it through lies." She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Joel, please. Not here." I laughed under my breath. "Why not? You love public performances, don't you?" Some of the guests had started watching now. Not everyone, just the observant ones. Her friend Shayla, her mother, a few coworkers. The music still played softly behind us, a lullaby to the end of a marriage. I didn't need to expose her completely. That wasn't the point. I wasn't here to burn her down in front of 100 people. No, I just wanted her to feel what I had felt. Alone, cornered, trapped in the spotlight of a life she'd staged. Every second she stood there, every set of eyes that drifted toward us, every awkward glance between her and Rob, it all chipped away at the kingdom she'd built on deceit. "Do they know?" I asked her calmly. "Do your friends know that the man you've been lying to for 14 years is also the one who paid for their daycare, their piano lessons, their orthodontics? Do they know how many times I missed work when Eli had asthma attacks, thinking I was caring for my own son? Or how many nights I stayed up with Marin when she had nightmares about monsters, never realizing the monster wasn't under her bed. He was sleeping with her mother." Her knees buckled slightly. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Rob whispered something to her, but I didn't care. I turned and walked back toward the house. I didn't need to watch her fall apart. Not anymore. Because it wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. About reclaiming the version of me that she tried to reduce to nothing more than a bank account and a bedtime routine. And as I passed through the doorway, I looked out across the yard, saw the kids laughing with their cousins, unaware of everything. They didn't deserve this. None of it. But the truth was no longer just mine to carry. It was hers now, too. And she could choke on it. I didn't sleep that night. Not from rage. Not from regret. But from something far quieter, relief. There was no grand explosion, no dramatic meltdown, no screaming in the front yard with neighbors watching from their windows. That would have been too easy. Julia never came inside after the incident. She lingered in the garden, surrounded by twinkling lights and wilting party favors, trying to smile through the embarrassment like a politician caught mid-scandal. Rob was gone before dessert. He never even said goodbye. Her mother disappeared shortly after, not making eye contact as she left, which said more than any apology ever could. I stood in the dark living room, alone, watching my kids sleep on the baby monitor. And I realized something that hadn't occurred to me in weeks. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of waiting for something to change. Tired of holding a family together with duct tape and denial. But beneath that fatigue was something new, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. Not just about what had happened, but about what came next. In the morning, I made breakfast. Pancakes. The kind Eli liked with the chocolate chips hidden inside. Marin sat at the table in her pajamas, watching me like she could sense something had shifted. I served them both, kissed them on the heads, and told them we'd be going on a little weekend trip, just the three of us. No drama. No tears. Just time. I didn't explain everything. Not yet. They were too young for the full weight of it. But I promised myself I'd never lie to them again. I would never build a life out of half-truths and fake smiles. They deserved better. So did I. When Julia came downstairs later, she didn't speak. She just stood in the doorway, eyes puffy, makeup from the night before still ghosting around her face. I poured myself a coffee and looked at her, not with hatred, but with the kind of calm that comes after a hurricane has passed and you're standing among the wreckage, breathing, alive, and ready to rebuild. "I'm filing next week," I said. "I won't make a scene. I won't drag you through hell. But I won't stay." She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just nodded. And for once, I believed her silence meant she understood. That it was over. 3 days later, the kids and I were hiking in the state park 2 hours out of town. It wasn't fancy, no resorts, no spa days, no curated photo ops for social media. Just trees, clean air, laughter. I watched them race down a forest path, yelling about frogs and sword fights and imaginary dragons. And for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like a background character in my own life. I was present. I was whole. And in that moment, I understood something no betrayal could ever take from me. I was always a real father. Not because of biology, but because I stayed when it mattered. I showed up. I cared. And now, I was walking forward. Not broken, not bitter, but free.